The days are longer, the calendar is filling up, and I want to feel as good as this beautiful summer weather. That's why I've been loving Groons. It's one daily pack of gummies that covers my greens, vitamins, and minerals, and even has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber. So I don't need to juggle a complicated wellness routine on top of everything else. They taste amazing. They're easy to toss in my bag on the go. Plus, they're vegan, gluten free, and HSA, FSA eligible for reimbursement. Save up to 52% off with promo code podcast at gruns.co. That's code podcast at gruns.co.
Let's talk about sports nostalgia. We're in a very strange period in the sports world now where the only games you can watch are games from yesteryear or even earlier this season. Michael and I have been in the business for a long time. We have favorite memories. There's a little Wild news to talk about. We'll talk about. I also want to kind of project what kind of team the Wild could be next year if there isn't an NHL season. So we'll wrap everything into this show with Michael Russo. This is the Russo Hockey Show, part of TalkNorth.com. Please subscribe to this show and the network at your favorite podcast app. Check out the new talknorth.com for archives and all of our new content, which is a lot of which is outdoor related. And follow us on Twitter at TalkNorthPod. Thanks to all of our sponsors and everyone who has worked with us over the years as we built up the network. Everybody's going to go through a tough time here. So we're going to just try to provide you with some distractions, try to have a little fun here. And thank you for listening. So, Michael, are you the kind of person who will turn on an old hockey game? Because I'm kind of split. It's like, to me, the great draw, the great lure of sports is you really don't know what's going to happen. So I'm not the kind of person who's usually going to flip on an old game. And yet, as we're sitting here talking today, game 163 from the end of the Twin season in 2009 is on, and I'm actually enjoying it more than I expected to.
Yeah, I especially like games that I've covered actually because a lot of times when you're covering games, you really are. I know this sounds bizarre to fans, but you're working, right?
Yeah.
So you
Your
don't get
head's
to
down.
see. Yeah, you don't get to see everything. I see a lot more than I did at the Strib because at the Strib you're filing at the gun, you're writing as the game is going on. Where I mean, that's the cool part of the Athletic is that we have no deadlines. Um, but I have enjoyed watching these old Wild games and seeing things that I didn't see before. The other night, NHL Network had a bunch of games on that I did actually have on almost as background music uh, in the background as I was reading, actually. And then, and then I will say I've enjoyed some of these old baseball games. On one of the networks the other day, they had an old Expo game, and I was an Expos diehard growing up. And it kind of brought me back to when I was a kid, and I used to sit in front of my parents' bed with a flashlight in front of my mouth, pretending I was a play-by-play guy, calling old Expo and Met games. And same thing, I used to go to Shea Stadium as a kid, and I would sit there and pretend I was an announcer during the game, keep score during the game. But I was like the lone kid at Shea Stadium that was an Expos diehard. I'd be covered to toe in Expos gear. As typical New Yorkers, even though I was a young kid, I'd be trash talked as I was leaving. It was pretty funny when I look back on it now, but I was a massive Expos fan. I was a Tim Wallach fan, a Gary Carter fan, an Andre Dawson fan, a Tim Raines fan. All
Great
those
teams.
teams. Yeah, I mean, those teams were so fun as a kid. I love the colors. I mean, it was crazy how many Expos games. I knew every single thing about the Expos growing up when I was probably age 5 to pretty much till when I was a teenager, and they unfortunately left town.
Well, for me, one of the formative experiences for my career, my life was that I was an Air Force brat, moved all over the place. My dad got out of the Air Force so he could work for a company, the American Can Company, and they moved him as much as the military did. So I moved all over the place, and I did my real kind of formative year growing up in Pennsylvania and in the Baltimore area. And my parents, and back then, one of the great things about America back then was you could go to a ball game and go watch a doubleheader for like $5, right? And
Hmm.
you could, I mean, and the concessions were dirt cheap, parking was cheap. The sports really were for lower middle class as much as anybody else. Whereas now you see families and people who don't have a lot of disposable income have trouble going to the games. Back then we could go anytime. We could go anytime we had time. So going to all the games in the Baltimore area, especially Oriole games at Old Memorial Stadium, and getting to read the Baltimore Sun every morning and the Washington Post, and then reading all of Thomas Boswell, the great columnist for the
Hmm.
Washington Post, Thomas Boswell. He wrote the Orioles were not only a great franchise, but they have just a bunch of characters, including Earl Weaver, the manager. Reading Thomas Boswell write books about the team that I got to go see in person really made me want to get into this business.
Yeah, and I mean, as you're talking, I'm just thinking of all these things when I was a kid, and I actually like legit have a memory. So it's crazy how often my parents were divorced at a young age, so my dad always got us on weekends, and it's amazing, especially during the summertime, how many Mets games my brother and I went to, and I like legitimately remember in my head when tickets went up to $8, and my dad being so ticked off about that, and you think about that now, right? $8, and we used to go in for batting practice and all that stuff. The other vivid memory, and I've told this guy this 1,000 times because I've been lucky to work with him for 20 years, or at least I did until he stopped doing games. But Howie Rose, which was he was the Mets kind of the third guy post game shows. And he was the Islanders play-by-play guy. Excuse me, the Rangers play-by-play guy. Like he's the one that did the Mateau, Stefan Mateau call for the Rangers in '94. But my brother and I, when we used to leave games, we used to sprint to the car so we can listen to the WFAN, the fan post game shows. And Bob Murphy was the play by play guy, legend. He passed away probably 10, 15 years ago. But Howie Rose would host the show. And he used to play all of Bob Murphy's calls during the game, like like they do now. If you in the post game show, you play the highlight that you tee up, like Fallness does for Wild Games and things like that. And it was our favorite thing is to go and hear if there were like 3, 4 home runs by the Mets in that game. We sprinted even faster to that car just so we could hear Howie Rose play Bob Murphy's home run calls.
Yeah, just great stuff. Let's get to a little bit more current events here. Hey, listen, as I said, everybody's going through tough times here. Every business is going to be hurting if they're not already. Hey, our business might be hurting here, including the big companies we work for and Talk North. So all I'll say is if you're going to spend money, try to spend it locally. Try to spend money with and we would appreciate if you spend money with companies that have supported us through the years. Right now, one of our newest sponsors is Grey Duck Vodka. They just started up this great business. They're doing really well. And hey, if you're going to drink a vodka, drink Minnesota's vodka.
When we asked you to get the duck out, wow, did you respond? Grey Duck Vodka is now in over 1,500 locations and expanding every day. This is Chad Greenway, and I just want to say thank you for making Grey Duck Minnesota's vodka. With the wonderful ingredients from Minnesota farmers, Grey Duck is gluten-free and has won 3 gold medals for taste. For all upcoming events and a list of locations carrying Grey Duck, head to greyduckspirits.com.
Please drink responsibly. Grey Duck Spirits, LLC, Lakeville, Minnesota.
Get the duck out.
So there have been a few wild roster moves. And are they just kind of business, like
Yep.
minor business things, or is there anything that really matters?
Yeah, I mean, the Mitchell Chafee signing was a pretty good signing. He was one of the top college free agents in the country for UMass. Was an All-American 2 year last season, so not this past season, but the season before. And so you add another high-scoring right shot forward to the mix, and you see if he could develop down in Iowa next year and potentially give the Wild games and potentially eventually make the Wild. And then on all the prospects that they've just signed, they were all Giroux was 2 years ago. And then last year they drafted Beckman and Hunter Jones. All 3 of those guys have been signed. In terms of Beckman, he is 18 years old, very, very young. He turns 19, I think, in May. But a young player that led the Western Hockey League in points. was near the top of the league in basically every single category. He was a highlight machine. I'm actually talking to him this afternoon, Jim, and so I'm looking forward to writing about him. But he's somebody that would either have to play, again, if you are a North American Canadian Hockey League player, you are not allowed to play in the American Hockey League as a teenager. If you're European, you are. So that's why, like, say, Jonas Brodin was allowed to, during the lockout, play down in I think it would have been Houston at that time. Houston or Iowa? I can't even remember. I think Houston.
Right, Houston.
But Beckman would have to play because he's turning 19. He'll have to play in the either National Hockey League next year or back in juniors. And my guess is that he's probably too young to play in the NHL. Hunter Jones is a different story. He's a weird birthday. He turns 20 on September 21st. That would technically make him AHL eligible next year. But I think it's this is just me. I've not talked to anybody with the Wild, but I think that it's unlikely that you would put him into the AHL unless, I mean, the one great thing about Hunter Jones at a young age in juniors is that he is playing a ton of games. And I did a Q&A the other day with Brad Bomdier, and the one thing that he pointed out about goalies is that the most important thing, no matter what level you're playing at when you're a young goalie, is to get games, get reps, both in practice and in games. And if you put him in the AHL and you're battling with maybe Kakkonen down there, who knows? I mean, Kakkonen could be in the NHL, but then still you would think that Robson would be the number one down there. You have Baribeau too, that's signed, that could be in the AHL next year. And then you have Jones. Do you really want him even splitting time, let alone maybe being the backup when you could play a ton of games in junior? So my gut says that he'll go back to junior as well. And then the interesting one is this Giroux kid. I mean, he's lit it up pretty much in the OHL. So I want to see how good he is. He can go back to junior as an overage, but Billy Guerin told me the other day that they plan to turn him pro, so he will play in Iowa next year. He was a 2018 draft pick, so of the 4 guys that they signed this week, or 3 prospect guys that they owned the rights to previously, he was the only one that had to be signed by June 1st this year, or they would have lost his rights. So that was the most important thing, is to get him at least done by June 1, turn him pro, and then we'll see how he does next year in Iowa. But that's the one thing about guys like Beckman and Jones is that, especially with Canadian Hockey League players, you only own their rights for 2 years, or you can lose them. And so, like, say Beckman goes back to juniors this year and has another monster year, and then decides to, essentially play hardball in a year. Not for necessarily more money, because the contract is the contract for these entry-level guys. But say that there's another team that he's always dreamed of playing on, and he could play potentially hardball and put himself either back in the draft or, sometimes it would most likely be back in the draft, but and not become a free agent. But to me, it just made sense. You might as well just get it done, and then his contract slides no matter what. And that was kind of the most interesting thing there. With the other 2018 draft picks, there's no other real issues as far as guys right now. Okay, Philip Johansson is their first round pick, but he's in Europe still, so the Wild own his rights for a total of 2 more years. Jack McBain's in college, so the Wild don't have to sign him now. Hovinoff is already signed. Duer is already signed. Johansson's another one that they have time to make their decision on. So Giroux is really the only one. Sam Hentges is still in college. So Giroux was really the only guy that they had to make a decision on right now. I'm trying to look up real quick at Boudreas. He's another OHLer that they might have to sign by June 1st. But pretty much the Wild's business from that standpoint for 2018 draft picks is pretty much done.
Okay, and I'll give you a second to look that up while I thank Twill in the Dining Galleria, our longest-running sponsor, has been sponsoring multiple shows on the network for a long time. His business has grown as ours has. Scott Dayton has been great to work with. With social distancing, it's going to be hard to run these businesses, hard to hold things together. So if you're doing okay financially and you want to support a local business, you want to have great clothes, go to twillmn.com. Twillmn.com. Go to the gift certificate or gift card tab and order up a gift card. It'll be there for you when we all get back to normal shopping, and you'll be supporting a great local business. Twillmn.com. All right, did you find what you're looking for?
Yeah,
there, Mike?
it doesn't look like Boudreas is signed yet, so he would be the only guy that maybe they've already made a decision that they're not signing him, or maybe they'll just wait a little longer, or maybe they're going to get that done in the next day or so. But he's the only other guy that they technically have to sign by June 1st, 20, or they'll lose his rights. He played in the Quebec League last year, and everybody scores in the Quebec League, pretty much. But he's somebody else that was pretty productive there. I'm looking it up real quick. Played for Cape Breton, and he had 35 goals and 79 points in 59 games. Was the assistant captain. So that's somebody else that we'll see here in the next little bit if they sign him. But that's sometimes the good thing about drafting college and European guys, Jim, is that you do get to you get more time. You don't have to sign them right away. So that's the case with guys, the two Johanssons, with Henches and McMahon, is that the Wild don't have to make decisions on those guys right now. And so we'll see what happens with Boudreaux here in the next little bit. That's the only other guy.
Is there another topic you want to get to before we go to Twitter questions?
Not really. I mean, not much is going on. I think, like all of us, I've been pretty much in my house for a long time. As I mentioned, I'm talking to Beckman today. I did a Q&A the other day with Brad Bombardier. That was actually, I did the interview in February. We finally ran it the other day. And then I'm working on 3 or 4 other types of stories that I think fans will like here in the next little bit. But obviously an odd time for all of us that are sports writers to be coming up with good story ideas that are, the one tough thing with this is, and I don't know if you found this, Jim, is the story ideas, there's plenty, but it's like, I keep on always thinking to myself, one, does it feel manufactured? Like, am I writing it just to write it, but it doesn't interest me? Because I am the type of writer, I don't know how you are, Jim. You actually, I know how you are. You're a very creative writer. But for me, like, if I'm not interested in the story I'm writing about, I can't fake it. And it reads dry and it reads boring. And so, that's the toughest part of this whole lockout, if you will, is finding that motivation to just make sure that you're writing stuff that that the reader is going to be interested in, and that's the hard part right now.
One interesting aspect of that, though, Michael, is I think sometimes you and I are our own harshest critics. I mean, I know there are times I file a story and go, God, it just didn't. I didn't get it to where I wanted it to be, but it's time to file it, and I'm always find it remarkable. Sometimes I get the best feedback on columns that I was like, oh, I don't know, should I even write this? But then you write it and there's something in there that's unique and people appreciate that. So you're probably being too hard on yourself.
Yeah, and I do think that hockey fans are to that point where they miss it and they just are interested. And just judging from the questions I've gotten the last couple of days about the even the prospects that you just brought up here, I think it's probably was a good idea today that I at least try to get Beckman on the phone and try to at least write about it and give people a little inkling about why these guys are being signed right now.
You've probably figured out that we won't be doing any live shows here for the foreseeable future. We do appreciate the fact that Tin Shed has sponsored our shows and has hosted our shows. They're good people down there. Brian was very generous with us. He's generous with his employees. They are providing 25% of their profits now to their employees, try to keep them afloat because, hey, a lot of people in the service industry are really hurting as much as if you don't have a big company to support you, you're in dire straits. So if you're in the Savage area, you can do good by ordering takeout from Tin Shed, tinshedmn.com. Go to tinshedmn.com. Make sure they're still operating in that way. And that's another place you can either get takeout or you can buy a gift card and support a good local business. We do appreciate them sponsoring the program. So let's go to some Twitter questions. I guess one more question for me before we go to Twitter questions. It is interesting to me, Michael, that, some aspects of our government are pretending this isn't a big deal, that it's not going to kill a lot of people, that we should get back to, and it seems to me that the sports world is much more realistic about this than the real world, because sports teams, you can't fake it, and every sports team has medical experts on speed dial who are telling them, hey, this ain't going to be over with soon. So I'm curious what your sense, talking to Wild people, is about their level of optimism of even getting back, midsummer or late summer.
Not very optimistic. I mean,
Right.
first of all, it took sports a while to figure this out. I think, like all of us, I don't think any of us thought that this was as big a deal. But I mean, like the NHL, as I said, I mean, they were doing everything to pretend it wasn't an issue at first by playing the games even after the health departments suggested that they are canceled, and then coming up with the ridiculous no media in the room policy,
Right.
which is
Oh
just.
God.
I
I
mean,
almost
now looking
forgot
back,
about that.
now you're looking back on it, and you just my reaction is exactly what's happened here. I mean, you're having players come out and now into a crowded hallway with just now more public,
So
and
stupid.
doing interviews. I mean, it was just insane. And then a couple days later, I mean, again, and not even a half hour after our show ended, the last live Tim Ched show is when the NBA suspended its season. And so but here's to me where there's not a lot of optimism is that I was watching Mark Cuban last night on CNBC, and he was saying that there's no doubt that when the NBA comes back that they'll play in front of empty arenas, and that's fine and dandy, and that might be the case. But the biggest thing here is from a social distancing standpoint is if this does come, even if we get the coronavirus, temporarily under control here for a little while, I think all the data says that this is going to come back in cycles. It's going to be like a seasonal flu, only now what we're trying to do is eventually find some sort of vaccine. And the reality is that when you're in a locker room, whether media is in there or not, you still have 30 or 40 people in there.
Hmm.
And so, like, you could say, so no, avoid the fans, don't put the fans at risk. But the reality is there's still 23 players in a locker room. There's still 5 or 6 coaches. There's still 7 or 8 trainers. There's still, the periphery staff like chefs and the team services people. And
Clubhouse workers.
yeah, I mean, there's just the reality is that there's 40 or 50 people, so they're not social distancing. And then you're going and playing this harsh physical game where you're sweating and breathing and bleeding on each other, and against 5 other players at a time on the ice. It doesn't seem like how this is. It's just right now I'm having trouble envisioning how this just magically starts up. And then the biggest question that I'm sure a lot of fans have, that the same with the media and the teams have, is what's it going to look like when we get back? I mean, are
Hmm.
we going to play some sort of tournament? Is it just going to be the 16 teams that were in it? How do you reinvent what that they were in this intense playoff race, all these teams, before we just ended. Now all of a sudden you come back in June and you're supposed to reinvent that, and what type of game shape are these people in as well? Or say you have a little play-in tournament, are you really going to make all these Europeans fly back to maybe play one game? It's just bizarre to even envision. And that's why, genuinely, I mean, we already saw the NHL yesterday canceled all its June events, the Combine, the
Hmm.
NHL Awards, the
Hmm.
NHL Draft, which is not an easy decision to make. I hate to tell you, Wild fans this, but I wonder about the Winter Classic next year. I mean, there are 2 reasons why I wonder the Winter Classic. One, let's just say they do have to push back next season for one of 2 reasons. One, because of the late ending of this season that they restarted, or 2, the fact that maybe we don't have this pandemic under control by later in the summer and they decide to push back training camps in the start of next season. Are you going to have a Winter Classic 20 games into a year? And then the other thing is how do the Wild sell this? You know what I mean? Like right now, I mean, this is the time that they would be trying to sell the Winter Classic. And if, again, you want fans to travel to this thing. And, are St. Louis Blues fans just going to all of a sudden just buy tickets now to come to Minneapolis in late December? So, I don't want to freak people out. The Wild's Winter Classic might have to be delayed a year, but I do wonder if that's sort of going to be eventually next on the horizon.
Yeah. This is going to be a crazy time and a scary time for a while now. We'll continue to bring you interesting topics on this show, but I don't know how soon we're going to be talking about actual hockey. All right, let's go to Twitter questions. Hey, quickly, Tony Hoagland, your State Farm agent is my State Farm agent. He's also Michael Russo State Farm agent. He handles all of our business. HOAGLUND.
Every team knows that the 2-point play can be a winning move. That's why State Farm agent Tony Hoagland and his team are here to help you go for 2 by combining your home and auto insurance. It's a great call that saves you time and money. So go for the win and score savings by combining your home and auto. It's just another way we're here to help life go right. Call State Farm agent Tony Hoagland at 763-421-4900 or online at champlaininsurance.com.
From Kay on Twitter, any guess as if the NHL goes straight into playoffs or they finish the 14 or so games? Well, you just kind of answered that. We don't know. From
Yeah,
Zepper.
I do one thing just to answer.
Yep.
It's funny whenever anybody says their name's Kay, the first thing that comes to my mind is Kay Jewelers. I don't know why. Oh, you know what? One thing I should talk about at some point is the social distancing poker that I've been playing lately.
Oh.
Yeah, but to get to that question, I just don't see if I'm understanding what you said correctly. I just don't see how they're going to play the rest of the regular season. One from a timing perspective, but two, I just think it's very unrealistic that all of a sudden the NHL's 31 teams and the NBA's 30. Is it 30 or 32 in the NBA? Jim?
I think 30, but I'll
Okay.
double check that.
So, I mean, regardless, 61 teams, I don't see how you're going to be able to reinvent all their schedules, just from a building availability standpoint, a travel perspective. So I just think they are going to have to come back with some sort of mechanism. There was an interesting thing. Craig Custance from The Athletic did a story on, what the draft lottery would look like, which right now the Wild would technically be in because the Wild have missed the playoffs by 1 point. If everything starts up the way it is. And there were a couple of GMs that he talked to that came up with that maybe what they should do to come up with the draft lottery is to come up with some sort of mechanism where maybe like the bottom 5 teams, 6 teams play a tournament for the number 1 pick, and then if you do that, maybe I don't know, do you have a 26 team playoff? It's just it's a bizarre. I cannot imagine what Bill Daly and his crew are going through right now in the NHL offices, because every time you think of something, you're like, wait a minute, this also affects this. Like I was thinking yesterday, I hate to say it like this, but I was thinking about myself as what is Billy Guerin going to do about buyouts now, and when's the buyout window? There's a couple players on the Wild that might be buyout potential, possibilities, and they're going to have to come up with new buyout windows. They're going to have to decide on. There are 4 or 5 teams that have trades that they made in advance of the trade deadline that have to do with their draft pick that they're getting back determines if another team makes the playoffs. So in a case like the Minnesota Wild, who traded for the Pittsburgh Penguins first round pick that has a condition on it, depending on whether or not the Penguins won the lottery. Well, right now we don't even know if the Penguins made the playoffs, right? So there's just a lot of things that they're going to have to really work through here in the next little bit, let alone trying to figure this out.
From Zepper on Twitter, is Kaprizov able to sign earlier now that the KHL season is done? Is there any chance he goes back to the KHL for another cup run?
I mean, I don't know that. I can't imagine that. It's I don't know, more Kaprizov questions. The one thing I would just say is even if they come up with some sort of makeshift way to put the Wild in the playoffs, I still don't think you sign Kaprizov for this year. I just think, are you going to, potentially risk a year of his deal that would only get him closer to maybe a big number 2 contract by just having him play a couple of games? To me, that makes no sense. So I still think that, from everything that Bill Guerin constantly tells me, that 100% his contract would start next season.
That makes sense. From Scott on Twitter,
But,
what happened?
Again, nothing, it's totally, and I'm just going to trust Dan Milstein in the fact that Kaprizov wants to be in the NHL, so that re-signing in Russia is not something that's in the cards right now. But, as we've learned with Kaprizov before, everything's up in the air.
From Scott on Twitter, what happens to the first rounder? The Wild got
I just
for
mentioned
Zucker.
that one.
Okay.
That's the one that I was talking about. That's sort of, we don't know.
Right.
I mean, they're not going to lose. They're going to get that first rounder in some capacity. It just maybe has to wait a year. I don't know.
Right.
And frankly, the way Pittsburgh was playing, maybe the Wild would love it to wait a year because maybe they'll have a better chance of it being a higher pick. I don't know.
Right. From Ken Cutler, what is Donato's future with the Wild?
I don't know. I hope good. I like him. I still think that he was really showing great development. All he does is score. He was near the top of the league in goals per 60 minutes and things like that. He definitely was by far the best player on the Wild. He's got flaws in his game that he'll have to continue to fix, but he's, as I've said all along, I mean, guys like him make it because they're just so committed. He's a workout fanatic. He's a great character kid, coach's son. And you see that in his game. And so there's just things that he's going to have to that he'll have to continue to improve on, that the coaches are working on him with, and that's being more aware in his own zone. That's staying on his feet more. As much as he works out, he is somebody that can be rubbed off the puck. But from what I like about guys like him and Galchenyuk and Fiala is they all work their butt off. Like, just watch, isolate your eyes on Donato every shift, and you could point out every flaw you want in his game, and you can nitpick any player, but just watch him work, and he works his butt off, especially on the forecheck. And that was the one area where that surprised me about Galchenyuk, his last 10 or so games with the Wild, is that he works his butt off. Like, work ethic is never an issue with Galchenyuk or Donato. And that's a big reason why, if I were Billy Guerin, I would consider bringing Galchenyuk back on a cheap contract.
Interesting. From Will Tomlinson, Will brings up a good question. He said, can you put together your best Wild lineup since you covered them? Let's save that topic for another show. We might be able to really kind of go deep on either the best team you covered or the best compilation of Wild players you can draw from. Basically, draft a team from all the teams you've covered. That's a good question. We'll get more in depth on that.
Hey, look at is Will Tomlinson the guy from England? Look at his profile real quick. Does it say it's from England?
Doesn't say.
Well, I think it is, and just to let Will know, just the craziness of him tweeting right now is that in my right hand right now, almost as a nervous habit, I'm like throwing up and down this Nottingham Building Society official game puck that I'm pretty sure it was Will Tomlinson that I met this hockey season that gave me this as a gift.
Looking at his Twitter feed, he definitely looks like he is from England. So
okay, so I'm pretty sure Will came to a Wild game this summer, at some point this season, and I can't remember where it was. Maybe in New York or New Jersey, and it was New York. And he came up to the press box and he gave me this Nottingham hockey puck from the Elite Ice Hockey League as a gift. And I keep it on my desk at home. And I honestly, whenever I have writer's block or whenever I'm doing a podcast, it's like just out of habit, I just start throwing it up and down in my right hand. And then, so it's funny that he just asked that question because I'm literally playing with the puck that he gave me.
That's funny.
From Case.
From K Squared. I also want to thank Fixology Repair. Obviously, their stores are closed right now. When they get back to normal, please take your watches there, get your tablets and your phones fixed there. Check out all the accessories and gifts they have at the Big Mall of America shop. Just keep them in mind. Fixology Repair, fixologyrepair.com. From K Squared.
I was honestly thinking about the other day about people like John Hedges and and all these, I've mentioned the restaurateurs out there and things like that, but also I feel for these airline pilots and that guy Scott that comes to our shows. I've got to think that his schedule's been been decreased, and all the flight attendants that I know from Delta and all these people, this is just going to, I got an email from American Airlines today, and it's something I didn't even think about, telling me how they're going to reconfigure their aircraft for social distancing. I mean, just imagine that right now. Is that what we're going to have when we come back to being able to fly? Is that there's going to be you see when President Trump does his press conferences now, you have two reporters in one row and they're staggered, then two reporters in another row. Is that how it's going to be on an airplane now, where all of a sudden you have two people in a row, but they can't be right behind each other? I mean, it's going to be interesting the way this is going to go. If it's really a year before we get a vaccine, what it's going to be like when we go back into the sky, and then also what are the prices of these airline tickets going to be for the airlines that are going to have to compensate for the fact that they're going to, maybe because of social distancing, put less people on a plane. I don't know.
I can't get my head around that. I can't get my head around a 747 flying around with 8 people in it. I don't know, man.
There's a kid named Colin that is one of the equipment guys at the U. And he was flying back from Fort Myers a week or two ago, and he put out a picture of himself where he was the only person on a Delta jet flying back from Fort Myers.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. From K Squared, what's your best John Van Beesbrook story?
Best John Van Beesbrook story. Point of full disclosure, when I covered him, he wasn't the biggest fan of mine. We've since definitely reconciled. But at the time, we I think he looked at me as this kind of young punk. I covered him very early in my career when I was essentially a teenager, and 21 years old, and then it was kind of awkward at the time. So I think I've told this story before, but the Sun Sentinel which was the newspaper I worked out, right before Brian Murray got fired. Excuse me, sorry. Right before Doug McClain got fired as coach, they worked out a deal where coinciding, essentially going to run right next to my giant Sunday column each week was going to be a column by Doug McClain, and it would be ghostwritten by me. Well, before we even got to get started with that, Doug McClain was fired as coach, and Brian Murray, the general manager of the team, became the coach of the team. Well, the Sun Sentinel deal lived on. So every week, and it was perfect for a young sports writer because, here I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Every single week, I got to sit down alone with the coach of the team, but who was also the general manager of the team. And this was in 1997-98. And it was John Van Beesbrook last year with the Florida Panthers, and they were trying to re-sign him, and it was not going well. And every single week, I was essentially getting a front row seat to the negotiations through the eyes of the GM that I was ghostwriting these columns for, and it did create a lot of tension between John and I, because what it did is, because I had all this extra knowledge that things weren't going well and what John Van Beesbrook specifically was asking and all this stuff. I basically it was then when I would write my actual articles on their negotiations, I had all this knowledge that I was putting out there that John didn't think should have been public. And there was a real tough moment that put me in an awkward position. But I reported the fact that he was asking for $4.5 million a year on a day that they played the Chicago Blackhawks, where he gave up like 4 or 5 goals in the first period.
Oof.
And he was pulled from the game, and the fans at Miami Arena started chanting $4.5 million, $4.5 million, $4.5 million. And it really affected the relationship between John and I the rest of that season. And it, that was like in March or February. So it really, I didn't have a lot longer to have to deal with them. But, same thing. Another story that I remember still vividly is he had a game against the Buffalo Sabres that same year, earlier in their season. And I described the 3 or 4 goals that he gave up as bad goals. And the next day he took me into the locker room and said, can I talk to you for a second? And he's like, do me a favor, describe what a bad goal is. And it was the first moment where I realized also you have to be accountable for what you write.
Yep.
That, this stuff doesn't just go into an ether. And, I had to essentially, even though he obviously disagreed, I had to describe his goals the night before, and then he gave me his reasonings why they weren't, and all that type of stuff. But as I said, I've gotten to know John since, and coincidentally, I'm helping a friend of mine move into an apartment complex about 8, 9, 10 years ago. Okay, and this apartment complex is in New Brighton, and as I'm like helping him carry like a desk through the door, I look at like one of those call boxes that's at the front of a thing, and the first thing that I see there is Van Beesbrook. I'm like, well, there cannot be 2 Van Beesbrooks, right? So I immediately text John, and I'm like, hey, your son, does he live in Minnesota? And his son, Ian, was a goaltender at Bethel. I think it was Bethel. Was a goaltender at Bethel and living in the same apartment complex as my friend that I was helping move into this building. And I just thought it was hilarious. Like, what are the chances, of all the Twin Cities apartments and then that I would even see this call box. So, but yeah, his son, I think, was a goaltender at Bethel University. Now Beezer, as you know, runs USA Hockey.
Right. Oh, good stuff. Hey, Bill, our old friend Bill, used to come to our shows and sometimes bring his father, asked if there's any word on the contract talks with Susie.
No, that's a good question, actually. I should call his agent, because he definitely will not get the, I'm glad you said that. I'll call his agent right when I go off the phone. Because now, there's, no matter what happens, there's no way that he's going to be a restricted free agent. And if you're not aware of what this person is talking about, I'm just calling up Susie's contract here real quick.
Well,
And
while Michael looks that up,
okay.
I'll just say thank you to our producer Brandon Morton. Thank you to everyone who listens. Again, please subscribe at your favorite podcast app. You can also find the shows at talknorth.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at talknorthpod and just click on the links as they all come out. We have a bunch of new outdoor content in conjunction with Ron Shara Productions and The Flush, and it's high quality stuff. If that's your jam, check it out, please. And once again, we do appreciate everybody who's listening. We will keep doing shows and hopefully keep you a little distracted, a little entertained.
Yep. So I found it.
Find it?
Yep.
Okay.
I just got it. Did you just bring up Tony Hoagland, by the way? I just got a text from him.
I brought him up a couple minutes ago. Yes.
Yeah, there we go. So now, I'm playing with the puck while Will Tomlinson tweets, and I get a text from Tony Hoagland out of the blue. So Susie, and this, hat tip to a reader that actually brought this up when I was in Anaheim right before the end of the year, because it totally, I did not realize that essentially when Carson Susie hurt his wrist in Edmonton at the end of February, that what that did is it meant, without a doubt, unless the Wild went on a playoff run, but because of the time that Susie was going to miss this season, that he wasn't going to get to 80 career hockey
Right.
games, including the playoffs. And what that meant is because he's over 25 years old, that he is, instead of being a restricted free agent this summer, that would make him an unrestricted free agent because he's been in a professional for more than 3 years and hasn't gotten more than 80 NHL games, including playoffs. And now, because of what just happened, he will definitely become a Group 6 unrestricted free agent. So what this means is that instead of signing him as a restricted free agent and owning his rights, one, Carson is free to sign with any other team. And because of that essentially definitely ups his market, because now there's no really, now he's got 30 teams that he could conceivably negotiate with. And so what that means is that the Wild are going to probably have to overspend to keep him. And the Wild always knew that this year, remember, they had no reason to go out last summer and extend him. I mean, he was coming off a really up and down year in Iowa. Nobody ever expected him to make the team. Then he comes and makes the team. So the Wild always knew that this would potentially, if he had injuries, and again, they healthy scratched him a couple times at the beginning of the year, that this would become an issue. But now all of a sudden it is an issue. And so now what is his market? And as I wrote back this person on Twitter who asked me what I think his market is, I pointed out that Radim Simic guy from the San Jose Sharks that just had the same situation. He's 27 years old, and they had to re-sign him at 4 years at $2.25 million. And I've watched Simic play. He's a good player, but I would much rather have Carson Soucy. So I think that's his market suddenly, is that now all of a sudden they might have to spend 2.25 or in that ballpark to sign him. So it is definitely an issue, and I will I'll get on that right now. When I get off the phone, I'll call his agent.
Most important question of the podcast from Tim Timmer: how much money a year would you guess LaPanta spends on wine?
A lot. I know that his favorite wine is this Antinori blend, this Antinori wine. What's it called? Tignanello. It's called Tignanello. That's actually my favorite wine as well. And you could actually get that at Total Wine for a pretty decent price. But, the best part of Total Wine is that you could get great wines there for like 15, 20, 25 bucks, right? Like one of my favorite wines is like Chateau Saint Michel or Franciscan or, like those type of wines. And you can get that there at great prices. But even this wine is like 80 or 90 bucks or even a little more at Total Wine. So it's an expensive wine. So even if you get that at a bargain, if you consider that a bargain, you're spending a lot of money. And then I could tell you that every time you go out to dinner with Anthony, this actually might help him, is that you can't go out to dinner right now, but you go out to dinner with Anthony and you're buying a couple bottles of wine. And when you're buying bottles of wine at restaurants, they're upping the price significantly. So we spend a ton of money on wine. So I don't want to guess, but it's a pretty penny. There's no doubt about it.
From Brett Marshall: does the Jones signing, assuming he plays in Iowa, hint that Kakkonen will be moving up to the NHL and that Dubé will no longer be here?
No, that doesn't. It would have nothing to do with that.
All righty. Let's get a final thought from Michael.
Again, these guys, when they sign, they, for most cases, can go back to junior. and as an overage. And so then the contract just slides. So Hunter Jones had to be signed. Actually, no, sorry. He was a 2019 draft pick. He's just sort of an old for his birthday. So technically they didn't have to sign him till June 1 of next year. But again, I mean, you might as well just get it done now because there's no risk. Somebody asked me that on Twitter the other day, like, why do they do it now if you could just wait? And my only reasoning for that is, why wait? If you like the player, get it done so you don't have a headache next June. Remember the year that the Wild signed Mikael Granlund? They signed him right before the June 1 deadline. I mean, there was a very good chance that if the Wild didn't give him every single thing that he wanted in bonuses, that he was going to go back into the draft. And another example is Tyler Johnson. Now, it's a totally different situation, right? Because Tyler Johnson was an undrafted junior player, but same age, same situation as a situation like Beckman. So what I pointed out to this guy the other day that asked me why would they sign Beckman? Tyler Johnson was somebody that the Wild brought to development camp. They liked him. They brought him then to Traverse City, and in the first game, he tore up his shoulder. And so the Wild, what they did is they just said to him, "Hey, now, again, he was an undrafted free agent. He was an invitee. So I don't blame them for this, but they said to him, like, look, just go back, have a good year. And if you have a good year, we'll come after you next year." And coincidentally, by the way, Tyler Johnson, who was born in Spokane, Washington, and played for the Spokane Chiefs, Adam Beckman, who plays for the Spokane Chiefs. Well, so the Wild, what they decided to do is they signed Jared Spurgeon, Tyler Johnson's junior teammate, to a contract and said, "Johnson, go back and have a good year, then we'll sign you." Well, what did Johnson do? He freaking went back in 2010 after his shoulder healed and scored like 55 goals and like 120 points. And then what happened is the Wild, because he was a free agent, the Wild had to battle with the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Detroit Red Wings to sign the kid, and he wound up signing with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And so the Wild lost out on Tyler Johnson, which is why I always joke on Twitter whenever Johnson does something against the Wild, the one that got away. But it's sort of the same thing with Beckman, even though Beckman couldn't become a free agent. My rationale to this person that asked me on Twitter the other day is sort of the same thing. It's like Beckman just led the Western Hockey League in points. If he goes out and has another monster year and just decides, you know what, I really don't want to play for Minnesota, I'd like to play somewhere else. Well, now all of a sudden you got to go into June 1 and you got to fight this guy. So you might as well just get it done now. So that's really the big reason why you would sign these guys right now.
All right, let's get a final thought from Michael. Again, thank you for listening. Subscribe. Thanks to Brandon, and let's all hang in there together. All right, Michael, your final thought for the day.
Nothing. Just wishing good health for everybody. I do think that the one thing that's very important, we have an incredible thing that our CEO, and maybe I shouldn't say this because it's internal, but our CEO at The Athletic, Alex Mather, who's a phenomenal person. I owe everything to this guy. He has a thing that we're doing on at The Athletic where he has a challenge every single day where we have to do all four things. One is get 15 minutes of exercise. One, go outside and take a walk. One, this is where I'm not good. FaceTime somebody you love or care about or check in with them. And there's a fourth one. I'll try to come up with it. But I do think that the one thing that we're all going to have to start to do during this time that we're supposed to stay at home here, these next, hopefully only a couple weeks, is make sure that we're taking care of ourselves personally and making sure that we're healthy, because this is not a fun time right now to obviously be holed up in our homes and not be able to do a lot of the things that we've come accustomed to doing. And but it is all important that we really, for the good of all citizens, make sure that we do our part to try to flatten this curve, as they say. And but I love the fact that Alex is doing this challenge, because he's also, what it's telling everybody is that, yes, we want you to be productive and churn out stories and things like that, but don't just sit there and think that you got to work all day or be miserable and watch TV all day. I do think it's very important for all of our mental health to not watch the news all day, not look at our 401ks, not look at our bank accounts. I think it's now is not the time to do that. I tell my mother that every single day. So that would be my final thought for this podcast.
All right. And for, as an employee of the Star Tribune, I would say that I'm very proud of our reporters who are covering this. Jill Burkham's exceptional. Our editorial board has been great. We have reporters all over the place covering everything that is happening in Minnesota in relations to the crisis. So I really appreciate the way my organization's handling this. So let's all hang in there together. We will talk to you next week, and thank you.
And just real quick, the 4 things, talking to a loved one, going for a walk, doing 15 minutes of exercise, and supporting a local restaurant.
Yeah, good stuff.
Pretty little city built on a hillside. Music in the bars and fire in the sky. We went to the beach and it was covered in ice. And I used to call it home. So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world won't forgive